My name is Jonathan Fitchett, and I work as an academic English tutor in both the Centre for English and World Languages here at the University of Kent and also at the European University Institute in Florence in Italy. I am also a postgraduate researcher at Kent's Drama Department, where my research is primarily investigating and accounting for the cognitive effects of the language of play texts. And in my free time, I'm also a tango dancer. Now, what's the connection between all this? Well, I like to think that just as in the partnership in a dance, and obviously very close partnership in tango, the way both writer and audience respond to the stylistic choices, improvisations, and rhetorical moves is what results in a successful encounter. Now, I'd like to share with you some insights today into how an appreciation of academic English has changed, is changing, and should change, and then to what this means for academics, whether they are working professionals, researchers, or students. Now, I'll start with a personal anecdote. Several years ago now, I chose to leave teaching and become an actor. And although I had extensive experience on the amateur stage, I decided I needed formal training. So I applied for drama school, and I did the usual round of forbidding auditions, and I got in, but I didn't go. I couldn't, I realized, afford the bill. Instead, I opted for the cheaper option of doing a master's degree in drama at university, and thereby approaching the subject from a more academic perspective. Nowadays, most renowned drama courses are actually accredited by universities and thus have lower fees, subsidized as they are by the government. But on the other hand, they do have the assessment requirements of traditional academic courses, essays, exams, etc. Now, when I was speaking about this recently to a friend, a successful professional actor, about this increased accessibility to drama training, he frowned and said that while before there was an exclusivity to training based on finances, though these were often overcome through scholarships and other sources of funding, nowadays the exclusivity exists academically. Many actors simply aren't academic. But why not? What is this boundary that keeps the academic and the non-academic in their respective separated fields? Surely, if students are expected to undergo more academicized training to achieve positions of employment that hitherto was not the case, then some kind of dialogue has to occur between what the student brings in terms of their experience and identity and what the academy legitimizes and expects in terms of conventions and semiotic resources. Now, one way of addressing this is through an academic literacies approach. Academic literacies is a relatively new concept proposed by educationalists since the 1990s and may be defined as an approach to the teaching of writing that takes into account more epistemological practices and the existing knowledge of students. In this, it contrasts with, or rather subsumes, both the more traditional practice of teaching skills, that is, the mastery of superficial features of text making, and also the academic socialization approach, where students are indoctrinated into the conventions and genres of their respective disciplines in order to become successful writers. To this end, academic literacies seeks to offer a more transformative approach by considering alternatives to certain conventions, by questioning the extent to which these conventions help to make meaning, and also to whom they serve and why. The traditional normative stance seems to be to identify students' failings and to fix these through overt instruction and practice. The key point here is that the default position of the student writer is one of deficit. And this promotes a power disparity between the all-knowing teacher and the raw, nascent academic. Academic Literacies, however, tries to overcome all this by engaging in a dialogue between the two parties, by asking questions, by critiquing, by reflecting, by becoming self-aware and aware of the parameters of academic discourse and of how flexible those barriers are. One feature I have seen in my role as a teacher of young, new student writers is the ease with which they become passive. Passivity, though, is often a response to being made passive by a system that seems to promote an academic discourse that alienates and serves to exclude. Now, I'm not saying that we as teachers do this intentionally, but such intimidating linguistic power can so easily and unconsciously colonize the space between the student writer and the academy, simply by virtue of the fact that this is the way it's always been done. However, it is not a case of simply seeking to remove this power, and nor should it be. If all the tenets and standards of academic writing were dispensed with, leaving a general free-for-all, there would be a real potential for chaos. No, what is needed is a way to make it clearer why academic writing is the way it is and how it can perform its function in other, more creative ways. It is for the teachers and the academy to be open to this critique, to facilitate that dialogue, and to have writing act as a kind of support function for their students in their quest to become new members of the academic community. Well, this is equally true of my more experienced doctoral students and postdoc researchers in Italy, who, striving to be at the top of their game, are often in the thrall of their supervisors and professors. The result is that often their writing, rather than revealing their own creativity and individual voice, is actually mimicking a scholarly register as a defense against potential or imagined criticism, thus trying to sound clever in order not to try and sound stupid. And that's never a good idea. No, the task should be to negotiate and redeploy the power within the game without dispensing with the rules completely. And for this, both parties must be open to what the outcomes may be. One obvious criticism that could be levelled at all this is the potential for throwing the baby out with the bathwater, for accommodating the deficiencies of the student writer to the extent that we will all be guilty of dumbing down academic writing, that the previously unacceptable becomes acceptable, and we end up seeing ain't and gonna in every second sentence. But this is to underestimate the transformative power of academic literacies and the elements that are inherent to the student writers and the academy's mutual discovery of what constitutes good academic writing. Now, I've talked about the why behind this approach, and there is certainly substantial material on this, but less so perhaps on the actual how and its practical applications in the classroom. So maybe in my own attempt here to be transformative, I can bring in elements of my seemingly unrelated research field of playwriting. In this, I propose looking at an academic text to appreciate the literary effect it has on the mind of the reader. It is perhaps beyond the scope of this talk to go into the nitty-gritty of cognitive linguistics or text world theory or conceptual metaphor theory, but suffice to say that there is much to be delved into regarding how the features of a text can have an effective and affective impact on the reader. Admittedly, this research has been more in the field of narrative literature, but I maintain that this can be readily mapped onto the creative process of making an academic text. To that end, I have recently delivered a course on creative academic writing, which, among other things, asks students to look at various syntactic features of literature, such as metaphor, simile, inversion, and to apply that to academic discourse. Does it work? Does it lend anything to the reading of the text? What if we changed the word order, added or removed alliteration, changed the voice? This sense of play, I believe, added to the subsequent discussion of what parameters we can work within and or extend. However, there was always the nagging fear of being seen to be frivolous, of not adhering to convention and being unacademic. But that's why partnership with the academy is so important. If creativity is about taking risks, then without the space to do so, we will be stuck forever in an unevolving, unengaging, and alienating genre. So, far from a dumbing down of academic writing, I contend that through a process of negotiation, of engaging both writer and reader in an active partnership, this is actually increasing the rigor of the writing pedagogy. In an age where it seems that the commercialization of education is becoming the norm, where high fees are justifiably increasing the demands and expectations of the student client, there is a danger that as educationalists, we will be more satisfying the wants of the customer rather than meeting the needs of the student. I suggest then that a rethink of what academic writing entails goes at least some way to overcoming this conflict and producing a genuine, meaningful, and fair way for students to effectively communicate their ideas. And so, returning to the tango analogy, yes, there is a leader and a follower. But it is this reciprocal pressure between the two participants, the sense of give and take, and the dialogic processes involved that serve to create a mutually assured, effective piece of work. Thank you for listening.